Spread ideas to flow. Steph and Joe are on the go. On the go, go, go. Sharing what we know. From the classroom to the show. It's Steph and Joe on the go. Innovation, education. Moving fast with dedication. Come along, let's start the flow. It's Steph and Joe on the go.
Good morning, everyone, or whatever time you're listening in at.
Yes,
Joe,
morning.
how have you been, Joe?
Morning. I have been good, Steph. It's been busy. I know you've been busy as well. That's why, like, the Steph and Joe on the Go podcast has been pushed on the go. So I'm glad that we're back, and I'm glad we can chat because there's a lot that's been happening, right? You've been getting lots of questions about AI. I've been getting lots of questions about AI. You know, I think today would be fantastic if we had this kind of an open mailbag, right? Like, what questions have you been getting about AI, implementation, policies, procedures? And let's see if we can answer them together based on those questions we've been getting.
Yeah, that sounds great. So I know for like you in California, I don't know if it's every single state on how they're implementing AI, but tell us a little bit more about this computer science push with AI.
Yeah, so, you know, I'm part of California Department of Education's AI work group. So they've selected 50 educators across the state, well, educators, administrators, and various inners and outers of education to be a part of this working group, and including students, which is fantastic. And one big question that popped up during our conversations is part of the AI literacy definition in this framework we're crafting is teaching students about how AI works. And I put a question to the group. What does that mean? You know, like, does it mean just the basics? Does it mean just understanding that it's been trained on data and it utilizes probability and predictability to then spit out an output? Or does it mean computer science needs to be taught to students so they understand the computer science architecture behind it? And there were quite a bit of people that said it means computer science. And my qualm with that, my pushback to the group was, if our job is to create a framework that is accepted by educators, are we kind of pushing them away if we add these computer science components? While yes, I understand computer science is the backbone of how AI works, do we truly need to teach the students an in-depth version of what computer science is needed to get AI to work? Or should we just start focusing more on, here's the basis for AI, now let's learn how to ethically use it? And so I want to ask you, Steph, if you were a teacher in a third grade classroom and you were given this framework to teach students how to ethically use AI, and there's a component where you have to teach computer science, are you going to be like, I don't know computer science, why am I going to be asked to teach this? Or are you going to kind of investigate it on your own? I'm very interested because in my experience, teachers are like, I don't want to touch computer science, and anything about it scares them. What are your thoughts?
I mean, thinking about just my past few weeks, and I know educators too, like, it's been busy. And so telling me that I would need to add it into my learning or into my instruction, I think would overwhelm me because I'm like, when am I going to learn it? I don't have time right now. Like, it's the beginning of the year still, even though it's October, like, we have to create those routines in our classroom. We need to teach students how to use different tools that we might be using in our classroom. We need to, you know, teach curriculum as well in our classroom. And so teachers have a lot on their plate. And I feel like they're always just like, oh, just add one more thing to the teacher's plate. Oh, just add one more thing, you know? But I think sometimes it's like, yeah, it could be very effective, but I also think it depends on what are the educational goals when it comes to that classroom and using AI. And I really liked what you said earlier before we hit record about the car analogy. So I think you should share a little bit more about that too.
Yeah, you know, I'm big into analogies. I love to paint a picture for a group of people that's common. And so I use the idea of learning to drive a car. So when you're trying to teach a teenager how to be safe behind the wheel of a car, our number one goal isn't to ask them, do you know how the engine works first? Could you build this engine? Right? Our number one goal is we want to keep you safe. Do you know where the seatbelt is? Do you know where the gas is? Do you know where the brake is? Do you know where your hazard lights are, or this or that? Like, we want to make sure that they understand the safety features of the car and how to properly run it to get them where they need to go. And then, later on, if they start being interested in, I wonder how does this car truly work? Well, then you can start explaining about the combustion engine and how the spark plugs work and this and that. That's fine when they're interested in it. But I think right off the bat, I don't really think we need to go beyond telling kids these things are trained on massive amounts of data, and they use that data to create a probability and predictability of what the output's going to be. And then kind of leave it for a little bit. But in our group, we had a lot of people that are like, no, computer science needs to be taught. They need to know how it truly works. And I just feel if we go that route, you're going to have teachers push back. And then all this framework that's being crafted is going to be put to the wayside just because there's that computer science component. And so, one of the members of the group was like, well, I like your analogy, but what happens when the engine blows up? What are the kids going to do? And I'm like, how often does that happen? I've been driving for 25 plus years. My engine has never blown up. So like, I don't know. I'm just concerned that if we do place in these really detailed computer science standards into the framework might become useless because teachers are going to be like, nope, not going to touch it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, and I think too, like, we also need to prepare students for the real world. Like my husband, he works at Meta and he's like a part of this huge like AI cluster project. And I worry that, if we don't kind of teach the real world parts of computer science or with AI, are these kids going to miss out on certain skills, right? And so sometimes I think maybe tying it into certain subject areas like data literacy is really important, right? Also, the ethics and creativity with AI, like how do you use it as a think partner instead of just, oh, it did it for me. But how do we use it to where it's like, oh, I'm going to push back at the AI. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. But I think it's just very difficult for teachers because, again, like there's just so many things on their plate. And sometimes when I am doing trainings and sessions and I start talking about spaces like in school AI, people are like, wait, what are you even kind of talking about? Right? I feel like I have to kind of take a step back and explain like this can replace or be used as an exit ticket, an entrance ticket, support as you're researching, support as you're doing this, doing that. Because I think at first, a lot of people were just like, this is kind of an out there idea. Like teachers themselves didn't really have a clear understanding of what AI was because it is kind of that outward concept, I would say, at first when you're like, oh my gosh, here's all these AI things, right? But I think sometimes we've got to kind of just break it down for teachers and really even just kind of explain this is how it works, right? It's based off of algorithms and it is able to use those patterns to figure out what is next in that sentence. And it can be really overwhelming. So I think sometimes we really need to start simple for educators where computer science, I feel like, is not so simple for people.
Yeah, and I have the most the biggest respect for computer science educators, and I believe there should be computer science taught at the elementary level and at least as electives at the secondary level.
Every time.
I believe this, but I believe computer science should be taught by somebody who knows the ins and outs of computer science, just like in elementary school when we push kids to a band teacher to learn band, or to a band teacher to learn the recorder. Oh, my daughter's in 4th grade and she was given a recorder. I'm like, oh my goodness, who decided this was a good idea? But pushing students to art teachers, people who have subject area expertise, to give them the best. So I always felt that we should have a computer science teacher where kids are pushed into learning about it, right? That would be my recommendation. But for the average teacher, they don't want to really learn about this. They just want to teach their content. And I think when we train properly with AI becomes a natural fit to their normal pedagogical approach. It's just a different way of doing it, but it's not like brand new, right? Like Steph, you've been creating a lot of cool spaces that are built off of already existing ideas. It's just a new way to present it, right? And so when you create an existing route, but with a different vehicle to take that route, it becomes almost like, oh, I can do this. But when you try to completely build a new, I don't know. I just want to make this as easily approachable to educators as possible so that we can get it placed in the classroom and just get kids the best education experience as possible. And I could be definitely wrong, I feel if we incorporate computer science standards into these trainings, we're going to lose a lot of people.
Yeah. And I liked what you said there. Like, that's something that was a realization for me is I'm like, okay, when I explain a space, I'm adding one more thing into the teacher's plate. But when I started to realize, like, no, actually, this can be used as a think, pair, share. This can be used as an exit ticket. This can be used as an entrance ticket, research. And I started to really think through all of the different pieces that AI could be used to support what you're already doing in the classroom and maybe make it a little bit easier for teachers and students to feel more confident about their learning. I started to get more excitement than when I was just kind of like, oh, here's another thing. Teachers were like, oh, I didn't realize, kids would feel more confident if they work through that idea with a chatbot. And then I have a classroom discussion and my kids are so excited to talk about what they just learned about. Or I've even heard comments like, my kids just want to keep talking with Dot. We didn't finish our lesson. And they asked, when are we going to talk to Dot next? Right. And I think that's really exciting to see students excited to chat with the chatbot and they feel more confident and maybe they understand their learning at different levels too, because they're getting that immediate feedback and support throughout the learning process.
Yeah, and going along with that, like, I think a logical next step after students, have experienced the chatbots and seen what it can do, maybe towards the end of the year, we're like, hey kids, do you ever wonder how these chatbots are made? It's with your vocabulary. It's with your well thought out prompt. How about we have a prompting contest? We'll have everybody open up a Google Doc. You're going to think about a space you would like to create, and you're going to add as much detail as possible about what you want the chatbot to do and teach and how you want it to act. And then we'll vote on the best description of a chatbot, and then we'll make them, and then we'll have the class play around with them. That could be a super neat way of explaining how these chatbots are built off of natural language processing. But I think, to me, at least in the elementary realm, that might be the gist of what I would explain to them through all of this. But that's just me.
I love that prompting contest because I think, too, kids are using metacognition and reflection of like, okay, this part of that contest could be like, okay, pick a skill, that you think our class needs to work on. So then they're reflecting on all of the different content that they learned throughout your class. They're building out a prompt on what they think this chatbot should look like. And then you could actually create them for your students to practice before the end of the year or before the state test. I think that could be a really powerful way. I'm going to steal that idea, Joe.
You know what you should do? You should push that out to school AI leadership saying, hey, we thought we had this great idea. Maybe at the end of the year, we have a student prompting contest. And we have everybody vote on which chatbot's the best. And then at the end, a student gets an award as the best chatbot prompter. Yeah. School AI's first chatbot prompter. That would be super cool to get kids involved. And there might be so many cool spaces created from it that could then be added to the school AI library.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Now, okay, we're on to something.
We are. I love it. I can't wait. I'm gonna definitely just at least try it at the micro level down here. But if we can expand it to the macro level, I think it'd be phenomenal. Now, Steph, you were asked quite a few questions this week about AI and ethics and things like that. How about you state some of the questions you had, and let's see if we can answer those.
Yeah, so let's pull another one out of the mailbag. So my next question that I got this week that I thought, is a really good question, because there's a lot of research, and I know we've talked about research on the podcast, but this question was, what, if any, studies have been conducted about efforts on student grit, attention span, and learning?
Oh, yeah, that is a fantastic question. I do recall reading a study about AI being used in the classroom, and when it is used as an infallible trainer, meaning the kids don't think that it's going to be wrong. The kids take whatever output it's given and take it as the truth. We actually see a loss in their metacognitive processes. But there was a caveat in this, and that was, when trained properly, to really think out their prompts, to critically analyze what they're asking the chatbot to do, to critically analyze the output and remove what is wrong, and ask it, hey, try this again, but remove these incorrect facts. It actually enhances what they're doing. I need to go through my notes and find that exact study so that we can share it with our listeners. But in that study, it did show that there is an actual positive impact AI can have on teaching and learning when used properly. But it's very important that we talk about what is it used properly. And that's not using AI as a crutch, not completely relying on AI to get everything done, but using AI as a single tool in our toolbox in order to get us where we want to go. So that's my response. What about you, Steph? What would you say to that?
Yeah, I think too, it's just trying it out with your own students, using your own kids to see. And I know for me, like, I don't know if I've talked about it on the podcast, but I share this activity that I've used all the time, and I called it Beat the Computer. And so in Ohio, I think it's becoming more popular, but our state tests are actually graded by AI. And so an activity that I did with my teachers when I was a coach is the kids had to beat the AI bot. They had to beat it. And so they put in their pre-assessment scores. And based on this activity, they were scoring really low, like 2s, 3s, and 4s out of 10. So the highest score they could get is a 10. And these kids were scoring really low. And what we did is we told them, you have 2 weeks to beat the computer. You have 2 weeks to beat a score 2. You have 2 weeks to beat your score 3. And the motivation, the grit, the attention span, and the learning that I saw taking place during that activity was so impactful. These kids at the end of those 2 weeks were having conversations with their peers about writing. Like, writing is a hard thing, and they were actually talking about it. Like, you should use transition words. In this exemplar essay, this score got a 10 because I think this and this and this. Let's put that in our essay, right? They were like really dissecting the work that was done during the 2 weeks. And the conversations were so impactful. They were excited to have them. And all of this was a lot of motivation, I felt like. And so at the end, those kids were scoring 8, 9s, and 10s, and they beat the computer. And they did really well as well on their OST. So again, that's not like a research study that's out there by someone that is a researcher, but that was done in my own world, in my own classroom. And that just seeing how the kids work, seeing how excited they were, really got me excited. But I think too, it's all about how you implement it, right? Group work, it can be a great way to support attention span learning and grit. But if you don't have routines and processes in place to support group work, then that strategy doesn't work. They can be talking about anything but your curriculum, but that activity, but that project, and it's very, very low effective, right? It's all about how we support our students in the process is what I think, but I don't know if you have any other thoughts.
Well, the whole time that you're talking, I'm thinking an engaged mind is a mind that is learning, right? And when you create engaging experiences, when you create experiences that are relevant to the students, it activates learning and memory so that they can recall that learning, right? And so, like, if you do break kids off into group to chat about a project, you're absolutely right. How do you know they're talking about that project the whole time? Whereas if you're utilizing a chatbot, you can actually monitor to make sure that they're talking about that project the whole time, and then break off into your groups. And so I think what you're showcasing, right, is like AI is not this tool that's going to change everything. It's going to help create guardrails and better experiences to ensure that, you know, the kids are learning and doing what they're supposed to. So when they do get into groups, they have that background to be able to continue that conversation. And that, I love that beat the computer, right? Because it is truly engaging. There's a goal that they have to attain, and they're actively trying to attain it. And that active mind is a learning mind. And that's why you probably saw those test score increases. And I also want our listeners to understand this. Educators, you are researchers. Every single day you're a researcher. You're trying to figure out what's going to work for your kiddos, right? So I would tell educators, don't ever hold back on claiming what they're doing in the classroom is not research based. In fact, when I used to put in for ISTE proposals, part of my supporting documents was my own research I did in my classroom. And I said, if you're not going to accept classroom teachers' research, I don't know what you're going to accept. But teachers, keep on doing that research, but just document it. Document it and show, like, this is what I did, this is what happened before, this is what happened after, and this is why I think it's working. So keep up the research, you amazing educators.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've heard of ARC's instructional design model at all, Joe.
I have not. Explain it to me.
So it's an acronym. So A stands for attention, R is for relevance, C is for confidence, and S is for satisfaction. And what that means is if you have all four of these different components within your instructional design, your students will probably feel very confident about what they're learning and be a little bit more motivated in order to dive in. So like attention, it refers to getting your students' attention, right? And that can be done through a lot of different ways. Humor, maybe you're funny, maybe you're a storyteller, but hooking your students right at the start of a lesson, getting them to participate, thinking about ways that you can grab their attention. A lot of times I see teachers sometimes just dive right into the content. They don't set up the stage with like that hook. And that can, again, risk that motivation when you are maybe having your students explore AI, or I just say, go in the chat space, right? When we did the Beat the Computer activity, we set it up with like this story, right? Like, okay, guys, we have this computer and we've got to beat it, right? They're going to give us a score. No human is reading this. We have to beat it. We gave them like a challenge, kind of a game that they had to beat. Then there's R, which is relevance. And this goes into talking about our experience. It talks about kind of why, right? Why does this matter to me? Why does it matter that I learn this information? You can also do relevance through choice, modeling, transparency, kind of doing the think aloud. So maybe if I'm using AI, I model first and I have the chatbot up on my screen and I'm talking through with Dot and I'm modeling my thinking out loud. Maybe I'm showing, why does this matter? Maybe I'm using a Project Zero where I'm talking about the 3 whys. Why does it matter to me? Why does it matter to my community? Why does it matter to the world? But we're also kind of creating this need for, oh, this is why it actually matters to me. And then there's confidence. And this is where we're diving into that kind of difficulty level, expectations, self-confidence. We're also kind of thinking about like learning requirements. Do I need to break up this skill? So a lot of times, like I like to use roadmaps, or maybe the kids have different tasks that they're doing, or station rotation. And you're able to kind of break this down. So that way it's scaffolding those skills. Maybe they're sit-in starters. Maybe they're getting immediate feedback as they're going through that confidence. Then there's satisfaction. And this is where there might be some type of reward, right? There's some type of outcome. So for Beat the Computer, the kids, they saw their pre-test and they got to compare it to their post-test. Seeing that positive score was exciting for them, right? And so that is kind of the ARC's model for instructional design. And I think it can be used with AI as well.
No, I love that. I love that because, I used to say something all the time because when I was teaching my 8th grade science class, I would have people come and visit to just watch and see how I'm teaching. And some teachers would say, like, you're just being an entertainer for these kids. All you're doing is this. I'm like, listen, I'm not an entertainer. I'm relevant. I'm trying to create an experience that is relevant to my students. And sometimes that means you have to put yourself out there a little bit, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be with technology. It just means you have to show that you are an engaging educator and you care about your topic so that the students will care about that topic. And in order to do that, you got to be relevant for the kids in front of you, for them to be engaged. And I love that ARC model because it lays it out beautifully on what you need to do to maintain that engagement and that confidence in learning. And I think, again, your Beat the Computer experience right there shows that it works. You know, and that's why when we're looking at AI, don't look at AI to just say, like, how is this going to save me time? How is this going to make my life easier? Look at it as, how is this going to help my students understand the material more? How is this going to help engage my students in a way that I couldn't do it alone? Right? Don't just use AI for the sake of AI. There's got to be a purpose. There's got to be a reason. There's got to be a why. And once you identify that why, then go ahead and dive into your AI toolbox to choose the best AI tool that's going to meet your needs. But we can't just put AI out there like, hey, you have to use AI. And so I think I love this process of thinking, where and how can AI help me achieve relevance and competency within my teaching and learning? I love that.
Yeah. And I think too, if you're struggling with that ARCS model, I made a space in school AI for teachers that will walk them through, and then it gives them ideas on how they can use attention, how they can build relevance, and that you just add your standard and it goes through each of those activities, or you upload your curriculum and it can help you walk through to brainstorm with you ideas of how you can build confidence in your own classroom.
You know, I forget about that, Steph. I forget that we can use AI to ask questions and have like a guide on the side for us. I always think, how can we use this with kids? But I always forget, you know, that we can create these chatbots to help us and expand our knowledge and expand our creativity by brainstorming with these models as well. It's a good reminder that these are not just tools for students' use. They can be crafted and created for teacher use as well. I have to remind myself that.
Yeah, for sure. And then another question that I got out of the mailbag is, how would you recommend a school investigating and creating an ethics policy concerning AI?
Ooh, that is a phenomenal question, because that actually came up during our meetings on Monday. And the big question was, whose ethics? You know what I mean? Like, what ethics are you talking about? Because, again, you know, we were talking about, we're crafting these models for our state. And if we're looking at what other states are doing and they have an ethics portion, does that state ethics meet our ethics, right? So whose ethics are you talking about? So I would say right off the bat, you got to get a working group together at your district and talk about, what are your ethics you want to maintain and what does that mean, before you start saying, how do we teach ethics, right? That would be my statement, because ethics is a loaded word. Whose ethics are we talking about?
Yeah. And I think, you know, it has to kind of go with your maybe community as well, right? Kind of thinking through, like, what does our community look like? And I think you need multiple folks on that committee creating that policy. I don't think it should just be one person drafting out what that policy looks like.
Yeah, I mean, because, you know, when I'm working with my teachers, we actually do this norms activity, right? What would you say would be an AI abuse, and what would you say would be a proper use? I say, I want to hear from all of you, right? Nothing's off the table. I want to see what you would label as an abuse and what you would label as proper use. And I would say 98% of the people in the abuse column, they wrote, letting AI write for you, letting AI, turning work in that AI did, you did nothing. That is the biggest abuse of AI, they said. And that would be probably the number one tenet in our ethics policy. That would be using AI to complete your work and you turning it in as if it was your own. That would be the biggest black mark against academic integrity, which would lead to part of our ethics policy. So by talking with teachers like this and saying, what would you accept and what you wouldn't accept in the age of AI, that could be a great place to begin your ethics discussion on what is acceptable and what is not.
Yeah, and I think too, right? Like some districts, like what is the reason for adopting AI within your district? Because I feel like that kind of matters too. Is the purpose for personalized learning and differentiation? Is the purpose for, more student creativity? And so really kind of thinking through like what is our reason, what is our vision for this as a district, I think can help with creating that AI policy as well and what that might look like. And I know a lot of districts had to review their existing policies, like their handbooks and technology use policies this year and update them because, they started to see more students use AI in the classroom, right? Even though it's blocked, they can still get around and use their personal accounts to get on certain AI. So you can't just like block I mean, depending on, again, your policy and if it's for BACOPA compliant, definitely check that. But like your students are still going to use it. So how are we going to create our policies? I think really, really matter. But I think first you got to kind of think through and investigate and then draft out that policy. And then how do you roll it out? I think there needs to be training, right? You've got to support staff and you've got to communicate this to families and students. Like I was listening to someone this week that said, "Oh, I just snuck it into the handbook." I think you need to have that conversation with parents and be a little bit proactive about it sometimes too. And then teachers can start to implement that policy in their classroom.
Yeah, and another conversation we had about ethics as well. This is a very timely question because I just realized how much discussion I've had about ethics this week. Another question was, do we need to put ethics policies in place, not just for students, but for teacher use as well? And the resounding response was yes, right? In fact, I was looking at our technology agreement as teachers, and they just added something brand new, and I'm very happy with it. And it's based on everything we're talking about. And it's, if you use an AI tool and you decide to use the output that it gives you, that is you can't blame the AI tool if there's anything wrong or harmful that you are pushing out to students or parents or the community because of the AI. You take ownership of that and you have to acknowledge it. And so that acknowledgement they signed basically states if AI puts out something that's incorrect, you can't say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I used AI, the AI must be wrong." The answer in our district now is no. If you handed a document to parents, to students, that is your document now, and you have to take ownership of all inaccuracies in it. And I think that's important for people to understand so that they don't just willy-nilly use AI and say, that's good enough, and then push it out. They have to critically analyze any output and say, you know what, I would be proud to hand this out to my students. I would be proud to hand this out to my community, not just, I'm in a hurry, it'll do, right? So I think that's part of the ethics as well, is you take ownership of what is being produced, and you can't put blame on the tool once it's done.
Yeah, and I think I also have like a graphic. I know there's an extension to that school in Laguna Beach created, but usage of AI and technology and just quickly having a visual or sharing a resource with students and saying, no tools are allowed for this project. Oh yeah, they are permitted, but there's guidelines with it. And then do students need to acknowledge when they use AI tools? What stage can they use AI for brainstorming? Can they not use it for brainstorming? Can they use it for drafting and developing? Can they use it to edit and refine their thoughts and ideas? What's the task? What's the usage look like? So again, I think it really can be laid out, and you can also share with students those expectations as well as they're working through AI too.
Yeah, and all this cannot be done in a silo either, right? It has to be done in a transparent way. You got to have discussions with, all of your teachers, your department leaders, your students, your school community. So like you said, there's no surprises when something arises. We need to make sure of that. And also, I would also add into this ethics of, is it ethical to use one data point to accuse a student of using AI, right? If you say no AI and you have, let's say you have a detector, right? One of those tools that says it can detect AI use. and it spits something out that says there's a 60% probability the student used AI, and a teacher uses that as, I can't grade this, you used AI. Is that ethical? Is it ethical to use a machine which has been reported to not be highly accurate? Is it ethical to use that single data point to accuse a student of using AI? And my response is always no. And in fact, you should never accuse a student. I say no accusations, only conversations, right? If you think a student's using AI, you bring them up and say, hey, I have some questions about this. Hey, I have a question for you. But don't just say, you used AI, you get a 0, right? So no accusations, have conversations.
Yeah. Okay, Joe, I think those were the main questions, and I would love to hear more questions from the audience. So if you guys think of any questions, please send them our way.
Yes, we love it. The mailbag day is done, Steph.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that was fun. And I learned a lot and was able to kind of reflect and think through some of the strategies that, you know, do work or don't work to really support AI implementation as well.
Yeah, and we may not have changed the world today, but we did create the prompt party. We did create the student prompting activity. Let's see that happen.
We did start something really exciting. So hopefully if we can roll something out globally, that'd be really cool. But if not, you can do it microly in your own districts.
That's it. We can't wait to see it. Well, thanks, everybody. We appreciate you. And until next time, this is Steph and Joe on the go, continuing our go because we got to go to work. Bye, everybody.